Welcome to the podcast Artificial Art. My name is Steinar Jeffs. I'm a musician and a music teacher, and in this podcast I'll be interviewing guests about technology and creativity. Today we have Christopher Wieduwilt, who started in a garage band at 15 and then toured the US and worked with the world-class producers. Later, he scaled a startup to $150K a month and collaborated with brands like Lufthansa, Goodyear, L'Oreal, and Porsche. And now he's using that experience to help musicians navigate AI. And his company, AI Musicpreneur, offers tools, education, and a community for artists who want to stay ahead in the industry. And in this episode, we'll talk about AI music tools, what's out there, how they work, and which ones you should check out. So nice to have you here, Christopher.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me, Steiner.
And as a start, you have a kind of an interesting personal journey because you started out as a struggling musician, then you've pivoted into entrepreneurship. Maybe you could tell your backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that I come from quite a musical family. So my mom and my dad, they played piano and guitar, and my grandma was an opera singer before the Second World War. So a lot of the love for music came into me, and that also made me start a band together with my brother. Then we did that for a couple of years. It was sort of like a metalcore band, and I was playing guitar and singing / screaming kind of. And then I transitioned to being a solo artist. And this is how I got to London, where I wanted to build a career in music, but nobody prepared me for what was coming. And I think a lot of artists feel that way when they're trying to pursue it as a career. So I kind of went through the highs and lows of music, and it taught me a lot about the music industry, what works well and what doesn't. And yeah, now I'm very, very happy to be here and make it a little easier for artists to navigate AI plus music, because it's a very, very complex industry and topic.
Just to dig into details a bit here, because you said you moved to the UK or to London, and tried making it, I guess. How did that look for you? Do you remember your first day?
Oh, wow. Yeah. The first day I probably wanted to move home again because everything was so new, and it was the first time that I was also living alone. So I just had to find, you kind of see life from a different perspective, and you have to make things happen on your own. So I just started gigging around in London, tried to make connections, went out to gig, supported other artists. So I very, very early on kind of discovered that it's not just about trying to make it by myself, but building a network and uplifting others around me. And because it's a community at the end of the day, right? And what the music industry lives on is the companionship and everybody rooting for each other. So that's one of the great things that I take away from my time in London.
It's a great point regarding community. I just listened to a podcast this morning with an evolutionary psychologist, I think, who was talking about connection being like the main thing for humans. So to survive, it's in the wild, it's really important to have a connection with other humans so that you can cooperate. And this evolutionary mechanism guides us in lots of different ways as well, and particularly in music. And it's often said that if you want people to show up to your gigs, for instance, the best way to do that is to attend other people's gigs. And also to get people to listen to your music, you have to listen to their music. And still kind of an old-fashioned way of networking and building connectivity to people, it seems like. So you've gone through the stages of being a struggling musician, probably done your fair share of sending out booking emails and trying to get gigs or trying to get a label to release your music and all that kind of stuff. And then you've kind of pivoted over to more of the managing side yourself. How did that happen?
So when I was gigging around in London and trying to cut my teeth and making connections, etc., something happened that triggered for me that I didn't want to be on the stage anymore, but I wanted to be beside the stage and cheer other people on and try to make things happen for them. It wasn't that I wasn't confident in the kind of music that I was putting out, but I was just coming to the realization that a music career probably wasn't for me, and that I just wanted to be there for uplifting other people. So there was one incident that I remember. There was a gig that I played in West London, and the gig went great, but there was this one moment on stage and it was a song that was very quiet. So I'm a big fan of Novo Amor and like Sigur Rós. So that was kind of like the music that also influenced me back then. But there was this one moment where I just played a part that was like going for 2 to 3 minutes without any singing. But I was able to look into the eyes of the people in the crowd, and also kind of like tuning into myself. And I was coming to the realization it's really great to be on stage, but I'd rather be beside the stage and see other people get the spotlight, because I'm a shy guy. Like I'm not an extrovert at all. I'm an introvert. I would say about myself. So I'm much better like working from the side and helping other people achieve their goals. So that was kind of the moment for me where I was like, okay, let's try the business side.
Yeah. And then somehow you discovered using AI tools in that endeavor.
Yeah, so in 2010, I moved to London, and I stayed there until 2012 when I realized. So I worked a little bit on the business side for different producers and as a studio manager, and also for a record label, and I was managing a band back then as well. But it was just not enough to make ends meet, and this is also when kind of the cost of living in London exploded, and it was pushing people to the outskirts of the city, and it was just not affordable anymore to live in the city center. So I just basically ran out of money. So I had to move back home with my parents and kind of start completely fresh. And it was not in the music industry, so I went in the business and corporate side and to Berlin, worked there for a startup in product. And for the last 10 years before I got into AI, actually, I was working in product strategy, so helping launch digital products like e-commerce stores, B2B SaaS platforms, augmented reality applications, etc. But being in these corporate meetings and board meetings, I always thought like, what happened to the guy that just wanted to help artists and play songs? And that voice kind of got louder. And when ChatGPT came around, it was just where I thought, okay, this is the moment where I have to jump off the ship, of the corporate ship, and risk it all. And I quit my job. Tried to go very deep into AI and understand how to write prompts. So learn prompt engineering and how it can help artists build a loyal fan base. And I'm still learning. I think every one of us is learning, but it's an exciting time to witness right now.
Yeah, it's an evolving thing for sure. A lot of people in research also say that some concept they had for 5 years ago would make people laugh at them today, since it's evolving so fast, the industry.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you have experienced with using tools to helping artists, and what are the most interesting tools out there today? I mean, you could probably now go on. I've followed you on LinkedIn for some time, and I know you have made like whole plackets of categories of different kinds of tools and stuff. And obviously there are some tools that are designed more for the general public, such as text-to-audio apps like Sudo or Uno. But in my experience, musicians tend to want more control than these apps offer. So I was wondering if you have any insights on what the most interesting tools for musicians are right now.
Absolutely. It's a good point that you just mentioned. So if you go on Suno and Udio and apart, they're currently very much in the fire, right, with the pending lawsuits and making sure that we get a good outcome and that they actually train with consent on copyrighted music. I think that's very important that we get to that understanding that the music that has been created for the last 50 years, 50 to 100 years, has been crafted by musicians that took a lot of time, and they should be compensated for their work. So I think that is definitely also why musicians find it hard to use these tools, and I completely get it. The ones that are not in the music industry, and like you said, that just need background music, like custom soundtracks or anything else where it's more about background music, etc. And like little cases for podcasts, they find them very useful, but the tools itself, they don't have a DAW character. So I like tools like, for instance, like AudioCypher. You can directly integrate them into your DAW. It's a VST plugin that you can use for FL Studio and other DAWs, where you can create melody and chord progressions that help you get new ideas. Just this week, I was talking to Rohan from Controller Voice. They're just releasing a so-called music style sampler, which I find interesting. So you record an audio of your voice, for instance, or a choir or an instrumental, and then it learns about your style and it creates something new. So for the voice and the choir, you input your lyrics and you get an output that you can use. But this is not where it ends, right? So what musicians find interesting about the creation of music is just the journey of crafting something that means something to you. And Suno and Udio cannot give that feeling because it's a one-click. And you can mold it, right? You can extend the song and you can replace parts, etc. And you can do audio to audio, which by the way is not as good from my experience. The audio to audio part, where you get kind of like ideas about how to take a song if you have creative block. But yeah, AudioCypher is good. Controller, if you need harmonies, for instance, for your songs, Voice Swap is a great tool. They also have a VST plugin where you can clone your own voice and use it like for vocal layers. You can still use your own voice, but like one of the things that I always found very, very painful when I was recording music was I just loved doing vocal layers and harmonies. And it took me a lot of time to do that. And most of the time you have to record it twice, 3 times, etc. So it's great to have these tools now to kind of speed up the process and just tell it, well, this is exactly what I want. Can you duplicate what I already recorded and help me kind of finish that song? Because these are the mundane tasks, right, that kind of take away from the music creation process. In the same way that if we get to like mixing and mastering, right, from the music creation part to the mixing and mastering stage, there's a great tool called Fort. They're a bunch of founders from Italy. So they build an import tool which works for Pro Tools, and they're one by one also rolling it out to other DAWs. But what it does is you input your audio files, could be like 50, 60 files. And most of the time to prepare a project, it takes sometimes hours to do that, depending on the amount of audio files. What it does there is it automatically color codes and categorizes your audio files into, okay, this is definitely vocals, this is a bass track, this is the hi-hat, if you've recorded it separately, etc. So these kind of tools, they really help, in the process to automate some of the stuff that is just really mundane and boring.
So the last one you were talking about, Fort, was that a categorization of sound files? Or what was the purpose of the plugin?
So let's say like you've recorded a song and you want to get into the mixing and mastering stage, and you've got a bunch of audio files that you now have available, and you send it to a mixer and master. So that mixer and master can use a tool like Fort to now automatically categorize and color code them. It has a strip silencer as well, so you don't have to, cut the silence away on the beginning and the end, and it just makes the mixing and mastering process a lot nicer in the end, and you get to the part that is actually fun.
So if you were to record in a professional studio, you would probably have a recording engineer do that work for you. Like labeling, naming stuff, stripping silence, and then sending it on to mixing. But if you do it at home, or you're an amateur, maybe you are not probably not. You don't have a routine for doing those kinds of things. So then you could use Fort instead, or the mixer could use it if you get a lot of unlabeled files.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's nice. So that's Fort. You mentioned Audio Cipher, which was a plugin for a DAW. Is it text-to-MIDI?
It's text-to-MIDI, and it's also a file manager. So if you have a bunch of MIDIs, I remember that just from my music days. I'm not too active anymore, but recording myself. But I would have all these MIDI files, like hundreds of MIDI files, and sometimes not labeled well enough. So the MIDI, I think they call it the Vault, Audio Cipher Vault, the MIDI Vault. It helps you organize your files, so in like different categories, and you can tag them so that you can actually find them back whenever you need them, which is quite helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, and regarding at least the stereotypical whimsical musician, getting some help in organizing is probably a good idea.
It would have definitely helped me back then.
Yeah. Let's see. So those are some tools for musicians. You were mentioning Audio Cipher. I haven't tried yet, so I'll have to check that out. At Create Me, the center I work for, I have this team of students who go in different directions in different kinds of projects, and something they spend a lot of time doing is checking out different kinds of AI plugins and see what they do and if it's any fun to work with. So in a couple of weeks we're doing this AI song contest where the participants get to use two different plugins, XL1 Life and Synplant 2. I don't know if you're familiar with those plugins, but they are sort of more for inspiration than replacing. So it'll be interesting to see what they get out of it.
That's awesome. So I was not aware of these plugins. So thanks for putting them my way. It's definitely some new stuff to play with.
Yeah. So I could just briefly mention what they're about, because XL and Life is where you can transform any sound input into a drum beat. So like a dog barking, for instance, and so you can get kind of crazy results out of it. And then Synplant 2 is a audio to synth synthesizer. So you feed it an audio, and then you get a synth based on that audio. Not exactly like a sampler, because it's re-synthesize the sound. So sometimes it's very similar to the sound that you feed it, and sometimes it's not. And that's kind of where the fun happens, when it's something in between a mistake and the original intent.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's a good point.
But those were tools for making music, and my impression is that you deal more with tools aiding in more the back end function for musicians, promoting and stuff like that. So it would be really interesting to hear your thoughts on first of all, what is a good promoting strategy in 2025? And what strategies do you recommend for artists to effectively use AI in building and engaging fan bases?
Very good question. So, and I spent the longest time trying to understand what moves the needle, and trial and error, talking to a lot of artists, talking to a lot of labels and producers to kind of understand, and just observing the market for a longer time before being active, just because I wanted to understand what the pain points, like the biggest pain points are. And I have some experience working in marketing, so I kind of am familiar with different marketing channels and how we can use them. But one thing that I'm seeing a lot is, so I call this, it's tofu, bofu, and mofu, like it's the top of the funnel. This is your discovery phase. So these would be normally tools like Spotify, where you get discovered, or on social media through TikToks and Reels and content that you post. So a lot of the artists that I see out there, they are trying to feed the top of the funnel to get discovered, and they don't pay too much attention to the mid funnel and to the bottom funnel. And the mid and the bottom funnel, this is where the money is, because we know from the top of the funnel, Spotify, unless you have millions and millions of streams, then there will be some money coming your way. But most of the time, for the majority of artists, it's not a sustainable income source that you can live from, and you're not getting paid each month, right? So you're getting statements very unregular, like 9, 12 months sometimes from Spotify. So while it's a great discovery tool, I would love for artists to use social media to grow and get a loyal fan base, but then take that next step and use a marketing channel like newsletter, for instance. The newsletter is still I know it sounds boring from the outside out, but it's still one of the most effective ways to reach people, because you just don't have to fight the algorithm all the time. And one of the best strategies to win, now you might think, okay, how do I get people inside of my newsletter and excited about myself? And one of the best ways is through freebies, lead magnets. So things that you give away for free to kind of give a taste of your audience of what you're delivering as value inside of your newsletter base. So when I teach artists inside of my newsletter, inside of my own newsletter, the AI Musicpreneur, about how to build a funnel that converts, because that's what you need to do at the end of the day. You need that funnel to have good content on your social media, so that you win followers, then you convert them into newsletter subscribers. And then you use a strategic number of emails to kind of nurture them into buying something from you. And you nurture them along the way. So that can be anything from concert tickets to membership passes or virtual experiences, etc. But once you've got them in your newsletter and you've found a formula that works, then you can become more more sustainable, rather than just wondering about 100% of the time to feed the top of the funnel.
That's a great insight. I also find it fascinating that when talking about it, you say fighting the algorithm. You don't have to fight the algorithm all the time. And I hear people talking about the algorithm in this way all the time. It's kind of interesting that we've already gotten to the point where we feel like AI is an entity which we have to fight. I don't know what that says about the time we're living in right now, but I just find it interesting. Also, the newsletter thing. I have heard loads of people talk about the newsletter, and it sounds boring, but it works. So you're saying you attract audiences. That's the top of the funnel, and then you convert them into Patreon or newsletter or something, and then you get your loyal fan base, or super fans, some people refer to them as, to buy stuff from you. And in all of these different funnels, I guess there are are different strategies within each funnel as well. So if we take it from the top one, how would you as an artist attract audiences on, let's say you're a band and you release some music and your main portal is Instagram, for instance. How would you go about getting more views and likes and engagement, and what kind of AI tools would you use to leverage this process?
So I was observing a lot of the TikTok creators, not just musicians that are winning audiences, but also any kind of creator. And the one thing that I notice is that they follow all the same sort of formula. They have varying content types, so they don't just post the, let's say, like behind the scenes content where you can see yourself recording. So that's more like the educational side, where you also you might give like step-by-step guides on how you create a beat, for instance, for yourself, or how you can write lyrics, etc. But they're taking care of the other sides, which is tapping into storytelling. So the empathetic side and the thought-provoking side, where you talk about different issues that are universal. For instance, so inside of my newsletter, to make people understand more about how they can craft content, I have this virtual artist, like this fictional artist that I just made up, and her name is Luna Ray, and she's from Brooklyn, New York, and she wrote a song called Closer. And Closer is about her troubling relationship with her mother, because her mother was fighting drug addiction, and she felt closer to drugs than to her own daughter. So this is kind of like the hook. That was the hook for the song. Now, for every part of the process to build a loyal fan base, I came up with different prompts. So if you have a song that comes out, I have a song release strategy prompt that I have. It's 4 weeks, and it builds on educational, empathetic, thought-provoking, and one more pillar. So it's 4 pillars in the end that give you enough content ideas, and that are varying enough. So with, for instance, Luna Ray, like, she has to tap into that universal feeling of, people are faced with universal issues all the time. So, and her issue was that her mother felt closer to drugs than to her, but someone else might be fighting through anxiety. And making, like, because you were talking about making that connection, it's all about making that connection. And how you start is with a hook that is universal enough that hooks everyone and that gets the intention. And then you try to tap into, telling your own story to back up the hook. And then you go to your CTA, like, your call to action on, okay, I hooked them, I told them my story so that they can connect with me and say that I'm authentic and I've lived through the problem that I'm trying to talk about. And now I take them deeper, and, for instance, they sign up to my newsletter because I have a mental health journal that I give them every week. And that's your first touch point to, okay, I get that mental health journal every week, but then you sell your membership pass, like with a 7-day free trial, for instance, and weekly Zoom calls, etc. That might be for free starting off, but you take that as an opportunity to kind of convert more actual subscribers into fans that actually buy something from you. So you have to be strategic about the kind of content that you create to make that connection.
I've heard people give tips on how to make successful reels on Instagram or TikTok, and a common theme among these people is that they give the tips of checking out similar content creators to you, and then finding outliers in the videos, so that you see which videos have received a lot more views or likes than other videos, and then do the same. Just basically steal the recipe from that outlier video and make a similar kind for yourself. Yep. And then just insert your own storyline, or as you were mentioning, there are different kinds of categories of content you can create. If it's telling a story or more educational approach, as you were saying, I guess some commonalities between those is that the audience gets something out of it.
100%.
Yeah. There's also the thing of pleasing the algorithm, as people say, to get people engaged. There are some approaches that kind of leverage the limbic system, or the lizard brain, also referred to as rage bait. How do you feel about rage bait and clickbait kind of videos? Do you think it's a good idea to follow that recipe just to get attention?
So I think you have to, I'm definitely on board with that. You have to have a hook that gets the attention, because this is the first 5 seconds are the most important ones. So your content can be really, really good, but if the hook is not getting people in and getting the attention, your other content will not be seen. But I would say, at the end of the day, I think it's about consistency. And I see that from my own content. I think what you should not do is optimize for virality, but you should optimize for authenticity and making that connection. And for some, it might take 2 weeks and they found the magic formula and they've gone viral. You only have to have that one or two posts that do very, very well. And I see that on TikTok. 98% of the reels, they might go bust. And then there's these 2%, the 1 or 2 reels that really make the difference. And this is where you get the majority of your traffic to your website or to your newsletter. So I would say write a good hook, tell your story, and have a good CTA to lead people to somewhere, not to make them go to a link tree that has other social media platforms and Spotify, etc., but take them deeper. So once you got their attention and you've got a reel with 100K or 200K views, you've got to use the opportunity to turn these followers into subscribers so that you can nurture them to actually buy something from you. And I think consistency and authenticity is a lot more valuable than just optimizing for virality, because it makes you go nuts as well. I try to analyze a lot of the times, okay, what makes a good hook, and there's different hook templates that you can use for different use cases, and it's great, but there's a lot of trial and error involved, and I think a lot of headache also. So don't be afraid to fail, get back up again and try again, because what you said is all the ideas are already out there. It's just about repurposing what already works. So if you find good ideas that work for someone else, you put your own twist and your story on top of it, and it could work for you as well.
Have you seen any hook templates recently that have caught your attention?
I have a bunch of hook templates. So I put together a free prompt library for artists completely for free if they sign up to my newsletter. And one of the prompts, or actually, I'm sorry, the hook template is part of my course. But I've got a hook prompt that taps into different templates. So one of the ones that work quite well usually is like counterintuitive hooks. So things like, if you go on YouTube, for instance, the most boring city in the world, where people think, okay, why would I watch someone visit the most boring city in the world? But it's counterintuitive and it's intriguing. So it gives us curiosity. Or something like, you would have to write that differently, but no one has made it through this song without crying. So, when you listen to the song, okay, let me try if it makes me cry. So these are the kind of templates and the kind of emotional hooks that give you that. They're still authentic, but they give you that attention from people.
That's a great point. One hook template I've noticed, probably because I play guitar. I see you also play guitar because I see some guitars on the wall behind you.
Yep.
But and I think this kind of hook hacks into people's insecurities, because I've seen a lot of hooks that sound like this: 3 ways to know that you're an intermediate guitar player, or 10 signs you've not yet made success, or something similar to that. Maybe because people are playing more at home than before, and they don't get as much feedback from peers and stuff. So people are sitting at home wondering, how good am I really? And then a video makes the promise that it can tell you if you're good or not.
Yep, good.
Which maybe plays into what you're saying about authenticity, because if you then watch that video and whether you find out if you're an intermediate guitar player or not, if that person making that content is then trying to sell you their pop album, for instance, maybe that connection between the content of that post and the content they're trying to sell isn't strong enough, so it doesn't seem authentic. So I think that's a great point you're making, that you're all in favor of making hooks, but the hooks have to kind of make sense and be authentic to the artist.
Yeah, I think you said something about that you need to create value on social media, and that is very true, because people will follow you for certain reasons. So one of the biggest reasons is because they feel a connection to the human that you are. And if you're providing value, and I wholeheartedly believe in providing value up front. So most of the things that I do on my website and on social media, it's all free content that I don't charge for. So, and I don't put it on people to pay me anything. If they want to get my course that I've created, then great, but you can still build a good fan base with the tips and tricks that I give inside of the newsletter. And I think people value if you're helping them and you make a difference in their life.
Yeah, I've noticed that about your website and your LinkedIn as well, that you give a lot of information out for free. Maybe that reflects your background as a musician as well. In the beginning, you were probably traveling around gigging for free and hoping for monetization after a while. But I mean, it's kind of a beautiful thing as well to give out information freely, because maybe the giving out of information isn't that costly for you, but it's real value for the recipient. And then when the recipient experiences that value, then they want to give you something of value back as well.
Exactly.
I guess it's the good old karma thing, maybe. One overarching theme when it comes to using AI tools to leverage promoting or booking or whatever is there's a lot of pressure on independent artists to do more and more of the back-end work themselves. Or maybe 30 years ago or something, you had promoters or booking agents and managers and A&Rs and all that kind of stuff. And now a lot of musicians have to do everything by themselves. That might be something AI can help with. I guess there's a duality there as well, because when there is a possibility of doing all by yourself, then you will tend to do even more. And what started as being a time saver leads you to just do back-end work and promoting and social media all the time, and not having the time to perfect your craft or making songs and the stuff you were really doing. Where do you feel we are at this moment in time when it comes to the axis of doing it all yourself and actually having time to focus on art? And where do you think we're headed?
So I think that's one of the biggest missions that I have, is to cut back time on the administrative and mundane task and show ways to do it, so that artists can definitely concentrate more on the music creation part. And I think there's so many tools that are flying around, and there's hundreds of tools that you could try and see for yourself if they actually solve something. But the first thing that I would ask yourself is, what are the kind of pain points that I'm experiencing as part of my work? And what would I wish I could automate or get help with? And once I've identified that, for instance, you're on a lot of different calls and it's hard to follow up on action items and to-dos, then it might be helpful to get a note taker like Fathom that just transcribes the entire meeting and records it and sends you a summary afterwards, so that you, if you're, for instance, talking to your manager and you just want to make sure that the advice that you get from your manager or anyone else that you work with is somewhere documented, it's just easier for the both of us. I think we're hearing a lot about AI agents right now. Right now, I would say they're still overhyped rather than completely useful. And we're talking about, agents taking over your browser and desktop to do different tasks. And OpenAI and their operator feature is, I've not tried it myself, but I've seen videos, and if you're automating a process, you always want to make sure that it actually works. So I think we're in that phase where it's still a developing technology and everyone is trying to make sense of it, how it can help you. But start small. So right now, I think it's very important to tune into yourself and get the help for different pain points that you have, to start learning about how to write a prompt, different prompt frameworks. There's so many prompt frameworks existing out there that can help you write a prompt, act like a, which is a little bit overhyped, but you've got to explain your you've got to explain your input, what you want, and a clear picture of your output. And any constraints that you have, if you want it in like 75 words or so, if you want it in 6th grade English, every little bit helps to get smarter answers from the machine. So I think we're still in that dabbling phase where everyone is trying to figure out the tool, because there's so many models released every week and they're competing against each other. Gemini, Claude, we've got Llama from Meta, and everyone is trying to top themselves with every week. And Claude 3.7, which is great for coding now. Okay, I've got to try that. But at the end of the day, you have to concentrate on what's important to you in that moment and kind of tune out the noise that is happening around you and stay consistent and locked in. There's no harm about experimenting, but focus on what creates the most value right now for you.
That's kind of how there is a business to be made by doing the stuff you do as well. That there's an entire jungle of new things coming out all the time, and it's very time consuming to go around testing everything. So I guess this is a kind of a small commercial for the Musicpreneur LinkedIn, because you have a weekly newsletter where you list the 5 major AI things that has happened the last week. For me, that's a great way to stay up to date on what's happened. So so check that out. I think that's a good idea. Let me give you some examples of some workflows I have, and then in making podcasts, and maybe you can tell me how I can improve upon it.
Cool.
After this podcast is finished recording, I will transcribe it. Since we're doing it in Riverside, it has its own transcription function, which works well. If I record in person, then I would use another transcription model based on Whisper AI, because I have it locally on my computer. Then I don't have to wait for the service to be available. But then I would upload that transcript into a custom GPT that I've made, where the first 15 episodes or so of the podcast, I did everything manually. But then I've uploaded all the transcripts and all the show notes and stuff in that custom GPT, and made some instructions on how to make questions and how to make show notes and intros and titles and stuff like that based on my style. So then I'll just upload the transcript of the episode into that custom GPT and get it to generate show notes and intro and title. and then it's always an iterative process. But usually I get it down in about maybe 15-20 minutes or so. Whilst before I had to spend maybe 2 hours on it. But after laying down the groundwork of the 15 first episodes, then it kind of gets my voice in writing pretty decently. And also when I prepare for podcast episodes, I usually also use the same custom GPT to make questions, and then I just feed it the information about the guest. And then, of course, I always have to check the source to see if it's actually correct.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been a real time saver. And and when I edit the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I use Isotope and Sonable plugins in Logic.
Amazing.
Which has some really powerful spectral analysis and noise removal, and also use Sonable to just set a basic template for a voice profile, and it can automatically adjust the EQ parameters. If, for instance, I have two guests using the same microphone, if we're recording live, then it automatically adjusts the EQ profile after who is talking, which is pretty great. I guess that's it, I think.
Amazing.
Is there anything that pops out? Should I do more?
I mean, we could always do more, right? But the question is, do we have to? And does it add more value if we do more? So when you're, for instance, you said you've got this GPT, this custom GPT. So I guess you give it some instructions and you have a few prompts that you use repetitively.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself being very satisfied with the first output, or do you usually kind of have to ask it a second or third time?
I usually have to ask it a second time, because even though in the instruction of the GPT I've specified that it should write in the style of its knowledge base, on the first try it never does. So I always have to specify again in the style of, or else I only get the generic standard ChatGPT response.
Mm-hmm. So I use Perplexity a lot, and their Spaces feature, but it's very, very similar to when like you would build your own GPT or use ChatGPT projects. But on Spaces, you can upload different files, and I have one file that is just my tone of voice. So it's an explanation of how I write with examples. So, for instance, if I want to write a social media post, I would give it past examples of my social media posts so that he learns the style. So, because there's characteristics like if I use a lot of adjectives or adverbs, and if I'm being very short, or do I write longer sentences? Do I use sixth grade English or more sophisticated style, etc.? And then if I have the prompt, I reference that file and say, please check my tone of voice file inside of my Space document links. And then it would usually write in that style. So that's one way to go about it, that you have it in a separate document to make it very, very easy to have a reference. Okay, this is how you should write, nothing else. So don't scan through my knowledge base, because your knowledge base might be quite big, like very, very a lot of different files, but he needs that instructions to say, okay, this is exactly the files. Do not use any adjectives or adverbs. Don't be vague and be more exact. Don't use words like. So I have like a negative keyword list as well, so that we can like get rid of the revolutionary and groundbreaking and such a significant shift. The things that you would get normally like with ChatGPT. So I have a negative keyword list where I list all of the words that I don't want it to use, to make sure that it doesn't spit that out. And then once you're there, like so right now I find myself kind of automating some of the stuff. So I love working with Notion and documenting it, and documenting my entire business there. And there's different. So for instance, like the top 5 news that I have on LinkedIn. Usually I I look for interesting content, so I kind of qualify them to say, okay, this is an interesting news. It has that angle, and I think people will learn from it. So, and then I put it into a database, in a Notion database, and it connects to my AI agent that I've built in a tool called Lindy.ai. So whenever there's a new database item, Lindy kind of asks for that. And it has a prompt that is inside of the AI agent that I built. And it gives me a 75-word summary of the entire URL inside of it pulls it back to Notion. So I just put in the link in Notion. A new database item is created. It sends it to Lindy, and it gives me the answer back to my Notion again. And that's one way for me to save some time in the process.
How do you find interesting cases or news?
Right. So it's usually the cases that are repetitive. So tasks that happen all the time, that happen daily, weekly, those are good candidates for me to automate. And the one-off tasks, and then I look for tasks that add no value to my business. So things that have nothing to do with writing the newsletter. So things like the note taker that I completely automate, and it gives me summaries of when I'm on calls. It might be invoices. So just the other day, I built an invoice generator app, because I have a lot of invoices. So I just input my data into like a Google spreadsheet, and then it pulls that information and it creates automatically the invoices for me. There's a tool called Poe. I don't know if Poe.com. It has like various AI models that you can use, and they have this, I think they're using Claude 3.7 Sonnet, which is good at coding. Takes a little bit of trial and error, but they've got this new app creator, in the same way that you can use Cursor and other apps. But I built that invoice generator app because I spend a lot of time on invoices and invoicing customers and, my expenses and stuff like that. So I built that app in 30 minutes, and now it saves me hours of work every week.
Something that came to mind when you were speaking about the style of writing and the voice of ChatGPT, and it has a certain kind of style in how it makes questions and uses a lot of adjectives and stuff like that. And I usually tend to avoid those formulations. But when I was preparing for this episode and making questions, I found myself coming up with a question in the style of ChatGPT, but it was me that made the question. So I guess it's influencing me right now. Okay, listen to this question. You can completely hear the ChatGPT style. Or it's not really a question, it's more like a headline. But from Warner Music to Rick Beato, the rise of microculture.
Yeah.
So there you have it, the rise of, and
the rise.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the YouTuber Rick Beato. Have you checked him out?
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So so he's a music educator and also now kind of a curator of artists as well. And he had this guest on a few months back called Ted Gioia, who was talking about the term microculture, which I found really fascinating, and that kind of a global trend right now is that the power is going from large institutions over to individuals. So there are less and less large music labels, for instance, and there are more individual tastemakers curating audiences through playlists or through interviews or platforms on YouTube or TikTok or whatever. And I guess that could be, or that is a good thing in many ways in terms of democratization. Maybe it's a bad thing in terms of music and art being a glue of society because we won't have that many common references anymore. But I was wondering, how do you feel about microculture, and how do you feel AI can assist in microculture development?
So I think since the internet came around and social media gave everyone a platform to raise their own voice, I think that's a positive thing. And we're seeing good and bad examples of that. Once you've got reach and once people listen to you, you've also got a responsibility. So I think when it comes to microcultures and communities, they're definitely gonna, like you said, curators and taste makers. And frankly talking, if we're going on a social media platforms where I don't watch any TV anymore, really. So when I want to keep myself up to date, I usually go on YouTube or I read on LinkedIn about different things. So people follow people. So I think that's a good thing that we're drawn to other people, because in the age of AI where we've got hundreds and hundreds of faceless videos and we don't know who that person is behind it. And they're making a lot of money. We see that on TikTok. Faceless videos make a lot of money right now, selling different products. So I think AI gives the power back to creators if they're using it in the right way to get their message across, in the same way that news outlets have done that since 50, 100 years. So that's definitely empowering for a lot of creators to and for microcultures to form and spread their message.
One argument that's often made, arguing the position of art in society, is that art can serve as the glue in society. And one example of this is, at least in Norway, we have a large growth of dementia choirs. That is people with dementia singing in choir, and that is kind of a music therapy method. And the reason why it works is because the way musical memories are stored in the brain is different from other kinds of memories. So even though people have lost the ability to speak or can't remember their name even, they still remember hymns or songs that they listened to when they were kids, or in their formative years at least. But in the age we're living in now, there probably won't be any dementia choirs 50 years in the future, because nobody's listening to the same music. They're just falling in their own little microculture. Or maybe, of course, you could have dementia choirs, but they're only in one small microculture, so that you would probably have to do it globally. And maybe you meet up with the 10 other dementia patients from Sri Lanka to get the same music. And I find it interesting that in the age of globalization, as we've lived through for a while now, the rise of the microculture and also perhaps AI kind of sends us back into something similar to tribes or tribalism. And this is, of course, a very, very large philosophical question. But I often find myself thinking about it, if that's a positive thing or not. Because of the positive sides, of course, democratization and the ability to choose and larger autonomy. And on a personal level, I really love it, because I totally prefer to choose my own TV series or music instead of someone else choosing it for me. But after a while, if you get kind of tangled up in some person with a lot of charisma, you might not have that much autonomy left.
I feel that. No, I feel what you're saying, because there's definitely decisions made for us based on how machine learning and algorithms work right now, because they're so personalized to the consumer behavior that we have on every platform. So they show us what they want to show us. Of course, they take into account interests and products that we might have checked out, or communities that we've been a part of, or maybe we visited that Instagram profile. So now we see 10 different profiles that are very similar to that creator. So we're definitely molded in a certain direction. But I guess every one of us has to come to the conclusion how much they want to get involved in that. So if you are online, decisions are made for you. If you go offline and I want to go into a cafe, I can decide myself where I want to go now, in my village that I like, and the people that I'm drawn to. And of course, if you see an advertisement about, or you get an email from Lieferando or whatever it is, like Uber Eats, don't you want to order something tonight? That's decisions made for you as well. But the question is, are these decisions completely made because you're still behind the wheel to make that decision? Or are they trying to help us in a certain way? And I think it's very complex. Sometimes they help us, and sometimes they're not good foundations to make decisions.
The clock is ticking, and I think we need to start wrapping it up soon. So one last question for you, Christopher. For musicians hesitant about adopting AI, what guidance would you offer to help them integrate these tools in their creative and promotional efforts?
Just start small. Get an AI tool and just start chatting with it. So that's the first step, is to being curious. So you don't have to know a lot of the things, just get used to talking to a machine. That's the first thing, if you're getting over that barrier. Then the next thing is how to nurture that tool to exactly give you what you're looking for. And this is where then prompt frameworks, etc., come into play. But if you're just starting out and you want to find out more about where you stand, just start chatting away. It's very, very easy. And I know there's so many tools out there, and there's so many ways to get confused about what direction you should go. But if it's about finding ideas for your content, you don't need a lot of expensive equipment. And we see that a lot, that people are drawn to authentic content. So there's people blowing up on YouTube that are just creating authentic content. So ChatGPT and other tools are great to give you ideas and then execute these ideas. But to execute these ideas, you don't need very expensive equipment. I think it's a lot about just taking that first step and getting over that barrier of talking to machine. And I guess every one of us has done that for now. But always fact check what you're getting. So don't 100% take it for granted what's being put out, especially if you're using the new deep research model from Perplexity. There's a lot of hallucinations that we still have. So that's very important too. But yeah, just stay open and think about what would help you the most now to take that next step to build a fan base. And if that's using a chatbot to get to a strategy that will help you execute, then that's great.
Of course, you could also use Musicpreneur as a filter to narrow things down, so you don't get overwhelmed.
Of course.
So I'll post a link to your website and your LinkedIn page, Christopher, so people can check it out.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining the podcast. It was a blast.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on, and talk to you soon, I guess.